Hello, I'm Matthew Bonds, and I'm here today to discuss the effects of COVID-19 on Delta Airlines Incorporated. Delta's ticker symbol is DAL. A brief history of Delta Airlines. It was founded in 1929. Its operations is based in Atlanta, Georgia. It provides customers domestic and international flights. The COVID-19 virus, or coronavirus, originated in Wuhan, China in late 2019. It entered America in the second quarter of 2020. It is important to consider the coronavirus's effects on Delta Airlines because the virus spreads through the air and on surfaces. This would be very crucial when analyzing airline industry since they're in tight quarters and you touch a lot of things on the airplane, and it's confined air being breathed. Also, to restrict the coronavirus spread, governments place government restrictions on gatherings and having so many people in certain areas, and they also initiated travel bans both domestically and abroad for international. So this definitely hurt consumer confidence and the fear of increased the fear of traveling and contracting the virus, which had a negative effect on Delta Airlines, which we will examine. I examined the financial statements and analyzed the differences. I began with the quarter 2 of 2019 and measured it and compared the percent change with the quarter 2 of 2020. We looked at the balance sheet, income statement, and statement of cash flows to analyze the effects of the virus from briefly 1 year prior to the quarter that the coronavirus really took effect. The total revenue for Delta Airlines took a dip between 2019 and 2020. In 2019, it generated roughly $12.5 billion, and in 2020, the total revenue was less than 1.5 billion. The percent change was a negative 88%, and then as you can see in the chart, it was a drastic hit in the total revenue raised for the company. The gross profit for Delta Airlines, which would be its total revenue minus the cost of goods sold, took a big hit. Also, dealing with the coronavirus, earnings before interest and taxes in 2019 was roughly $3 billion, and in 2020 it was in quarter 2 of 2020 it was negative 3.4 billion. So that's about a $6 billion loss on the gross profit for Delta Airlines, which equates to negative 210% decrease from 2019 or from 2020 to 2019. And this was due to the fact of the coronavirus, and people were scared of flying, and also that prices were drove up for necessities to maintain the business. The earnings before interest and taxes for Delta also took a hit in 2020 with a negative number. In 2019, it generated $1.9 billion, but in 2020, of quarter 2, it lost $6.8 billion for a change of $8.8 billion for a loss of $8.8 billion. This is about a negative 444% difference, percent change in 2019 versus 2020. And the chart will show the difference visually for the loss of money. At bottom line net income, 2019 quarter 2, Delta had a positive net income of $1.4 billion, and then in 2020 quarter 2, a year later, it was $5.7 billion for a difference of around $7.1 billion. This is a 496% negative decrease in the net income. This is due to the coronavirus impacts. The free cash flow for Delta Airlines shows the cash that's available after the company maintains its operations and maintains its capital assets. 2019, it had a positive free cash flow of $1.7 billion. And in 2020, the quarter two of 2020 had a negative 571 million free cash flow. And the chart shows it's a sharp decrease between the free cash flow. It had positive in 2019, negative in 2020. And it has a percent change of 133% negative. The common stock equity for Delta Airlines decreased by about $5.2 billion. Was a negative 37% different percent change from 2019 to 2020. This is due to the losses the company endured during the second quarter of 2020 because of the coronavirus and the lack of traveling and people purchasing flights. The total debt for Delta Airlines increased by about 87%. Had a positive increase in total debt, which equates to the Delta trying to maintain its operations and to maintain operations because they're not generating revenue. They had to do debt financing to continue its operations and to keep from going bankrupt. The annual ratio analysis for Delta Airlines, we're going to compare the 2019 to the predicted 2020 value. How I came up with the predicted 2020 value, I basically doubled the values of 1 and 2 and let them the doubled values be 3 and 4 of the 2020 year. Delta's return on assets in 2019, or Delta's return on assets in general, was not great, but it definitely did suffer a loss on its return of assets, and that is due to its negative net income in 2020. Obviously, if you can't generate a income, then you're not going to have any return on your assets, and that's why you see the negative 0.26 for its ROA. Delta has fixed assets, which would be its fleet of planes. It has a lot of planes, so when people are not taking flights from the fear of contracting the coronavirus, and governments are mandating that they ban travel to stop the spread of it, Delta's fixed assets really hurt the company when they're not being utilized. It's basically Delta's business is to provide flights, so if they're not being used, they're going to have a bad fixed asset turnover. And the drop in sales really hurt Delta's fixed asset turnover too. As you can see, in 2019 it was 1272, but in 2020 the projected values, their fixed asset turnover ratio was 876, which was a drop. I used the current ratio for Delta, and I didn't use the quick ratio because I do not feel like Delta has inventory. They do not have an inventory of flights, so the quick ratio wouldn't be a good judgment for that Delta. Basically, the current assets of 2019 and divided them by the current assets and got the current ratio of 41, and got 2020. I did the same and got a increase in the current ratio, but this may be due to the borrowing causing their that cash from the borrowing of the money to increase and their current liabilities increase. So that's why the that's why the current ratio increased. Delta's times interest earn ratio shows that they could not make their interest payment in 2020 compared to 2019. In 2019, they had a tie of 21.59, while in 2020 they had a negative 26.92. Delta had a negative PE ratio for 2020. In 2019, they had a 7.71, but in 2020 they had a negative 4.33. This is due to the stock losing half its value and earnings having a negative earnings for 2020. The stock price for Delta lost half its value. This can be attributed to the fear of traveling and spreading and getting the coronavirus. Just had a lack of consumer confidence that Delta or the travel industry as a whole could provide safe travel during this time, during the pandemic time. But that is why the stock price dropped, because the loss in consumer confidence caused investors to lose confidence in its stock. The capital structure for Delta, as you can tell, that Delta was not able to make its interest payment in 2020. They had to leverage more debt financing to continue operations, and the greater debt borrowing really affected the investors' confidence in the stock, and which caused a sell-off in their stock price. Delta's current asset management, its accounts receivable declined from quarter two of 2019 to quarter two of 2020. And I don't believe that was more people paying in cash. I believe that was from less sales being generated, so they didn't have as many outstanding payments waiting for them. The earning trends for Delta, Yahoo Finance, a lot of their analysts say that they believe that Delta's on an upward trend. They are predicting that their earnings per share and total revenue will increase in 2021 from 2020. They expect a recovery from the COVID-19 and the effects it has had on Delta. Delta had suspended its dividends in 2020. They do not have a future date when they will pick up dividends. It has paid dividends in the past, but for maintaining its operations and keep from going bankrupt, they had to take some of their what retained earnings they did have and put them back into the business just to stay afloat. In conclusion, it is obvious that COVID had a negative effect on Delta. It had just a general loss on everything, including revenue in 2020. The analysis shows a downward trend for quarter two of 2020, and really throughout the year. But it had bad fixed asset management because the planes sitting there were not being utilized, which were not generating sales. But analysts were saying that the upward trends are estimated for 2021, and they're expected to make a recovery.